Hi everyone, welcome to my latest video. I've been asked by someone to explain a little bit more about my Zelda obsession, and we'll start where it all began with A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, which was released in 1991, I believe. So it's actually only slightly younger than I am, which makes me feel somewhat old all of a sudden. So what was it about this particular game that ignited what's been a lifelong passion for the Zelda franchise and for Nintendo in some ways as well? For starters, I think the game looked and still does look absolutely gorgeous. I think, bearing in mind it was made for a 16-bit console, it's actually held up really, really well in terms of how it looks. And I dare say the story is one of the more interesting and compelling stories of the Zelda franchise. It was the first game to actually have quite a deep story, as well as a story that got explained during the course of the game. It wasn't all pre-planned for you, as it were. You had to find the story. So that was quite good and quite refreshing. So as you're playing the game and getting deeper into it, you're learning more about this world and how the Dark World came to be, and of the evil forces that are trying to destroy Hyrule. So the story was great. The game looked and sounded great. And the gameplay itself was just thoroughly enjoyable. There was a lot of stuff to do. There were, I think, something like 13 dungeons to explore, as well as quite a few things to find in the overworld as well. And you could use various weapons. You had your traditional boomerang, bow and arrow, bombs. You also had the ice and fire rods. You had various medallions with different powers. You had a magic hammer. There were loads of things you could do. And because of that, it made this game a very rich, very deep, very immersive experience. The dungeons themselves had some great designs to them. They were quite varied, and there were a great variety of bosses as well that you could contend with. One of the best bosses is one called Blind, the thief. And that was just an absolutely insane boss fight. But as I say, it was just a beautiful, rich, immersive game. And if you haven't played A Link to the Past and you happen to find yourself in a position to do so, if you're a Nintendo fan, it's worth sort of stopping the bus and getting off at A Link to the Past, as it were, and giving it a go, because you won't be disappointed and you'll understand some of the history behind the Zelda franchise. I think A Link to the Past was actually the first Zelda game that I played, although I've got dim memories of perhaps playing Zelda 2, but not really appreciating Zelda for what it was back then. A Link to the Past is certainly the first one that I played in earnest and actually developed an understanding of. And as I say, it kick-started a lifelong interest in Nintendo in general. What I'm going to do in a moment or two is actually look a little bit at the sequel to A Link to the Past. Well, I say sequel, it isn't, such as the way that Zelda works. You actually had a Zelda game on the Game Boy, Link's Awakening, but the next, if you like, really big marquee event for Zelda was Ocarina of Time, which I think for a lot of people was the big Zelda moment. And I dare say, a very, very good game. Thoroughly enjoyed it. It was, for its time, pretty revolutionary, what with the Z targeting and the 3D world and all of that. But it never quite, for me, had the charm of A Link to the Past. It never quite had the same character, shall we say. So I always find myself preferring A Link to the Past between the two. I dare say for what it was, Ocarina of Time was great, but it hasn't aged brilliantly in my view. And you can see graphically it's okay. It's never going to be amazing compared to today's titles, which isn't really fair to expect for it anyway. But I don't know, when I look back upon Ocarina of Time and yes, there were some great highlights. The final battle with Ganon in particular was epic, but I don't remember it as warmly as I remember A Link to the Past. And I think some of the more recent Zelda games, like for example Twilight Princess, are, for me, better than Ocarina of Time. And Breath of the Wild is certainly better than Ocarina of Time. I was, in my early days of playing Breath of the Wild, actually thinking it was my favourite Zelda game, that it had finally surpassed A Link to the Past. However, now having had a chance to sit down and think about it, I'm not so sure. I think A Link to the Past still possibly shades it. That's not to say that I'm disrespecting Ocarina of Time, because as I say, I did thoroughly enjoy it when I first played it. It was a pretty awesome new experience to play Zelda in 3D, and it kick-started quite a few things which have since continued to be in Zelda games. In particular, the trope of the targeting and things like that have gone on to become something of a mainstay. And like I said, the boss fights in Ocarina of Time, particularly that final boss fight against Ganon, were absolutely amazing. And that particular final battle there, especially when you're finally facing him in full-blown beast mode, is one of the most exhilarating moments in Zelda gaming, and I would like to think gaming in general, really, to be honest with you. But for me, it always comes back to A Link to the Past, and I dare say that it always will. I have fond memories as a kid of playing the game through to completion over and over and over again, and even now I've carried on doing that because it's a game I can just lose myself in, just quite happily sit there and just go through and play over and over again. It will never get old to me. I think even when I'm in my 50s and 60s, it's something I'm still going to want to play and I'm still going to enjoy, and it's always going to look, in my view, fantastic regardless of how old it gets. And therein, I think, lies the strengths of the title, really. It's a game that's been made to last. It's a game that you can easily look beyond the graphics and beyond the technology and find a well-crafted, well-structured series of levels and dungeons and monsters, and a great story behind it as well, which is really, I think, everything that we want from a great game.